Oh, hello everyone. Welcome back to Future Fiber. This is your host Jenny, and this is a channel where I talk about all the crafty things that I do. It's mostly knitting. Today we have a very precious commodity here with us, and it's called sunlight. As we know, in the winter, that precious commodity comes very few and far in between, so I'm trying to make some use of it. I thought maybe I'll do a little bit of a knit and chat. We'll see how much of the actually knitting I get done with the chatting, because today I'm knitting on this guy. This is the start of the Lonely Leftovers vest by Wool & Beyond. This is a pattern that I've been wanting to knit for a really long time, and I kind of like bit the bullet and started pretty randomly. We're working on the back yoke portion right now, and there's an I-cord edge detail that I'm trying to do with this like contrast black yarn. So we'll see how far I get. Hopefully I finish at least the I-cord, but I was thinking about like, what should I talk about as I do the knitting and the chatting? And I thought it might be a kind of interesting thing to talk about my first year on YouTube. I think I could approach this from a couple of different angles. Well, the first one is just like the financial impact of YouTube. I've actually seen a couple of other videos that talk about like, oh, this is my first year on YouTube. Not necessarily with knitting podcasters, but the main thing that they kind of focus on is like the financial impact. The other angle that I think I could approach this topic from is from like me being a knitter. Like, how has me being a knitting podcaster, YouTuber type thing, how has that kind of changed the way I knit, if at all? Well, let's start with like where I started, right? I started this channel back in December of 2022. So it's been a little over a year since I've been uploading videos on YouTube, and my uploading schedule kind of has been irregular, but I tried to upload at least once a week. Recently, it's been a little bit more spread out in between the videos because it's the end of the year and I had other things to do and it got a little bit busy and chaotic. But typically I try to upload at least once a week. I don't know if you've noticed that, but that was what I was trying to do. I have the podcast format, which is where I talk about like the knits that I am working on currently, kind of real time as I am working on them. That was being filmed at a cadence of every 2 weeks. And then in between those 2 weeks, I tried to film something that was like a little bit different, a little bit more one-off in content. So I think recently it's been a lot of like knit and chats because those are a little bit more, I don't want to say low effort, but it kind of is low effort compared to some of the earlier content that I've done, which is ranging anywhere from like a vlog to creating one thing in the video, like a challenge, like when I did the central cardigan, or when I did that video for having ChatGPT generate me a pattern and then knitting it, that kind of stuff. And then I tried to do that because I was being a little bit strategic. I think a lot of people are here for the talking and the chatting and just the general knitting vibes, which is the podcast crew. And honestly, at this point, the podcasts have a very steady, I feel like pretty steady audience, and they have a pretty predictable viewership. The people that watch those videos tend to come back for the next episode, but they are a little bit less likely maybe to click on the random videos that I put in every other week, which is to be expected, I think, because sometimes the random bi-weekly videos that I put out that are not podcast episodes, the content is a little bit unpredictable. It's sometimes not even about knitting. So if you're here for knitting, then it makes sense that you're not going to click on that as much. But those are also the ones that have a very varied success rate, because those videos are also the ones where I would do compilations of patterns, the t-shirt pattern video from last year. I think a lot of people came from that one as well. I think that strategy of giving people something to come back to, plus having something that will kind of cast your net a little bit wider in the YouTube universe, seems to be a pretty decent approach. I say this like I put a lot of thought into it. I really didn't. I am mostly doing this because this is kind of a hobby, you know? This is definitely a hobby. It's not kind of a hobby, it's definitely a hobby. Now we're getting into the financials a little bit, and I'll give you actual numbers. I don't know if you guys don't like money talk, then you can skip ahead a little bit. For the people who like the money talks, I think I'm just going to be totally honest and transparent with you. Like, the YouTube ecosystem does not allow you to be a full-time YouTuber making a livable salary, at least in where I am. I mean, I am kind of an anomaly. I do live in New York City, which is like one of the most expensive cities in the world to live in. However, even in most parts of the United States, I feel like the income that you could potentially make as a YouTuber, like a small-time YouTuber, is always going to be some type of like supplemental income that allows you to kind of put more money towards back into your content rather than something that you could generate a living off of. I want to say impossible, because obviously if you're a very popular YouTuber and you have a lot of monies coming in, you could definitely live in New York City as a YouTuber or an influencer. However, I understand that my YouTube videos and this little corner of social media that I inhabit is a very niche group. Even in that niche group, I am even more of a niche. So this is not something that I foresee kind of blowing up in any way. The cap of people who will watch me, even when I become like a typical influencer or whatever, I feel like is not that big, not that high. So that's part of the reason why I always foresee myself just having a day job plus doing this as a hobby. I can only speak for myself because my YouTube approach is obviously different from other people's YouTube approaches. I don't know how they do it. I don't know their like streams of income. I said like 2 minutes ago that I will talk about like actual numbers, and I didn't because I got sidetracked, as I always do. But let me put this down for 1 second and bring up some numbers. With my YouTube channel, I wasn't able to monetize it until, well, with any YouTube channel, you're not able to monetize it until you hit a certain goal that YouTube sets, some certain rule. I think it's like 1,000 subscribers plus like however many views or watch times it was. And I hit that goal relatively quickly, I think, as far as a YouTuber with no previous social media following goes. Like, YouTube was where I started my presence as Future Fiber. You can see even on Instagram. Like, this is kind of a side tangent, but I think the crossover from different social media platforms onto other ones basically is the spread rate is actually very low. So if you have a huge following on Instagram, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that those audiences are going to transfer over well into like YouTube or long form content. And I've noticed that with a couple of other influencers as well. So I have the opposite problem where I have more people that are watching my YouTube than people who are on my Instagram, which I think is totally fine because honestly, my feed is kind of a wasteland, and then my stories are like where I post up like close-up pictures of my face and then ask people for opinions. So if you're not into that stuff, that is totally fine. What was I talking about? Numbers? Right. I hit that monetization, whatever, Google AdSense, whatever goal relatively early on. I believe I was able to do that in like March or February. So like within like 2-3 months. So that was when I started generating ad revenue from the ads that you watch when you watch my videos. Since I was able to monetize in, it seems like late February was when I was able to start doing that. Since then, I have made a little over $2,000 from Google AdSense revenue. So over 365 days, give or take, I made about $2,000 off of YouTube, which that is not an insignificant amount of money. Like, let me be totally honest with you. That is actually more than I thought I made. This is not accounting for any sponsorships. I did, I think, in total 3 sponsorships or ads or whatever in my year, on my first year on YouTube. I'm going to be transparent here. I did not get paid like money for those ads. I received products in return, and I think two of them were yarn companies or knitting related companies. I think if you count those products that I received as part of the sponsorship as if you convert that to money, I'm sure like that would add a couple $100 more to the overall earnings that I had this year as a YouTuber. This is not an insignificant amount of money, for sure. Like, for some people, once you receive it in lump sum, it could be temporarily life-changing amount of money. However, think about the fact that this was spread out over 12 months, and it was not consistently 2,000 divided by 12. If I were to be like, I want to make a living off of this, then I need to make sure that I can have like some sort of like very consistent rate at which I put out videos, which I already kind of do. Like I think my upload schedule is relatively consistent, but even then, that's not nearly enough to live. So this is a long-winded way of me saying that this is just like always going to be a hobby thing and supplemental income that helps me like put back into my hobby a little bit. Like, I'm using that whatever 2,000 minus tax, whatever I made on YouTube, I'm just putting back into knitting. If you approach it in that way where you're like, okay, I like doing this podcasting, I like talking to other people and starting to build up this like network of knitters who are going to give me tips, or we're able to kind of share back and forth, have this, albeit parasocial a little bit, a relationship of community and, just having fun with it. I think that's a great mindset to have if you want to start a knitting YouTube, no matter what your audience is. It could also be a possibility that your channel that you start podcasting from, like, you might not get traction until a lot later, or frankly, like, ever. Like, I think that's also another thing that we should be totally candid about. Even if you are putting out content regularly, it could also be that for some reason the algorithm doesn't pick up your videos and you don't get a lot of views. I still don't know why my videos got picked up on the algorithm. I think it has a lot to do with timing. I think there were still a lot of knitting podcasters then when I started, but there were less than there is now. And at a certain point, if all your knitting is like pretty much the same, then it is also a likelihood that somebody will watch somebody else who has a bigger following, who is knitting like all the petite knit patterns or whatever, Like, why would you watch me knit a petite knit pattern versus somebody who has like 75,000 subscribers, who is also knitting a petite knit pattern? But, I just don't think about that too much, I think the financial thing is like a nice incentive for you to keep going, making videos. But if you like making videos, you like talking about knitting as you're knitting, then I think starting a YouTube channel is definitely not a bad idea, honestly. So that's kind of like my first year on YouTube financially. I also got I think it was the last Q&A that I did. Some people asked me, should I start a knitting YouTube? And my answer was yes, and I still think it's a yes. I think I mentioned it there too. Just don't think about your time on knitting YouTube as a means to make money, because my day job will always make more money than me being a knitting YouTuber, unfortunately. But that is just the way it is. And I also don't really plan on taking sponsorships this year. Well, first of all, like, there aren't that many people that are like, oh, let's work together, other than like goddamn Temu. Like, and I'm not doing a Temu sponsorship, and I'm not really in need of like the sponsorship money or products necessarily. So even if it's a yarn company, I think in the in the coming year, I'm just going to try and support them with my own income or whatever. But I mean, we'll see. Like, I've also had people just send me things without any like expectation of review or whatever. So I also think that has something to do with being a knitting influencer or whatever. Like, and I do really appreciate that. But yeah, I think this year, in the coming year, I'm not going to be necessarily taking on sponsorships. And I try and not put too many ads in either. Like, YouTube auto places them, but I remove a couple from the auto placed ads because I'm like, this is a 40-minute video. You're not going to be wanting to watch like 7 ads in one video. That's ridiculous. That's the YouTube financials. All right, I had to go work for a little bit, so I lost the race to stay in natural sunlight, but that's okay. That's what electricity is for. Yeah, I switched up my... Oh, wow, that looks wrinkly. I switched up my knitting because I got to a point in the Lonely Leftovers vest where I have to actually think. So I'm going to work on this Sophie scarf by Petite Knit instead. But I just wanted to kind of wrap up the video a little bit. And also, I didn't talk about how my year of YouTubing has kind of changed how I knit. And I was actually giving this a little bit of thought. The amount of knitting that I did this year is kind of abnormal, I think. And part of the reason why I knit so much is probably because I am doing this YouTube thing. Like, I think I would give myself a little bit more time to knit slower or knit less, and I wouldn't feel as pressured to knit as much. Not that I don't enjoy knitting this much. I really do like it. It's just that I don't think I would have had as much motivation, I think is maybe the right word, rather than pressure to knit this much if I didn't have a couple thousand people watching me. So yeah, the volume of work that I am doing is one thing. I'm knitting a lot more now that I am doing YouTube. But another thing is just like, this is probably natural, but I think I am getting better at knitting. That's kind of subjective, but I feel like I am more confident in... Not that I wasn't that confident before, because I'm kind of the type to just do it and figure it out later. But I'm not abandoning certain things in the middle like I maybe would if I wasn't doing a YouTube channel. So that's kind of forcing me to become a little bit more advanced. And now while I love my stockinette projects, garter stitch projects... Oh my god. There's a dog on the street that always goes for a walk during this time. And I don't know if it's like very excited or just like ill-trained or what it is, but he loves to bark. Yeah, anyways, what was I talking about? Yes. I'm feeling like I'm up for a challenge. I feel like maybe in the beginning of this year, I mean last year, so like 2023, I was talking about how I am okay being kind of an intermediate beginner, like confident beginner or whatever. And that's still mostly true because I think there is some joy in just having an easy project that you can knit on mindlessly. But I am craving a little bit of challenge this year. Quite possibly the number of my overall knitting might go down, but maybe the quality will go up a little bit, because it took me this long basically to feel like I want to try color work. I just didn't really have any sort of desire to try and do it. But recently, I've been feeling kind of inspired to try and learn how to actually do it. So that might be in my plans this upcoming year. Same as like cables too. I never really had a deep desire to do much cabling. But I think this year, well, I'm working on one cable sweater project, but that one's pretty easy. But I made a video about, my perfect Aran cardigan or whatever, and I still haven't knit it up. So that's definitely still something that I want to do this year. And as far as color work goes, I want to kind of make a ski sweater-ish. I don't know how to describe it. They're like these diamond patterns. like I want to try a yoke sweater that's like got these diamond patterns throughout. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of searching to look for that. But I went skiing with my friends for the first time in my life, and something about that like rewired my brain chemistry that I now think like that kind of like yoke color work is like really pretty now. I don't know, something maybe it's the falling and going down the hill on my butt a couple times. Something about that's really made me appreciate colorwork sweaters now, but now I want one. So I'm going to try and do something like that this year as well. And I don't necessarily think this is something that I would have tried to do if I didn't have a social media presence necessarily, because I am a person who, at the end of the day, kind of values, what's the word here? At the end of the day, I value my time. I want to be a little bit cost effective, I suppose. Like, this comes up a lot with sewing for me. Like, for certain things, I won't attempt to sew because I know that I don't necessarily enjoy the process of sewing that much. And I know that like the end result that I put out isn't going to be as like finished as something that I pay money for. So I don't do this all the time, but sometimes I think about, okay, what are my hourly rates and how is that weighed against like a piece of garment that I'm buying versus making, and then what will be the final output? Do I know for sure that this is going to be better than something that I can buy at the store for X amount of dollars? And if the answer is a no, then the likelihood that I won't attempt to make it myself is high. I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of my limits as a person. Therefore, I don't attempt to necessarily sew things like a coat or like a jacket or jeans necessarily, because I know that the cost versus my effort is not really going to line up. With the stuff that I've been knitting, I know that any stockinette basic item that I will knit, well, first of all, I know that I can knit while I'm doing other things like reading or watching TV or whatever. So I feel like that time is spent entertaining myself and being productive kind of at the same time. So that already is like a plus. But I know that any stockinette, like basic item that I create is going to be better quality, at least in terms of like raw materials and anything I can buy at the store for less than like a couple $100s. So it always seems to work out for me in terms of the little mental maths. But I never really thought that way about color work because I guess it's like because I haven't done it, so I can't guarantee like the result will look necessarily nicer than something that I can buy. So that's kind of that's like one element of what's put me off of doing color work. But this year, new year, new me, I will do some color work sweaters. And that'll be my challenge for the year. I think being a knitting YouTuber means you have somebody else that will kind of like laugh with you if you fuck up, basically. Well, you got like thousands of people who will laugh at you but also give you encouragement and tips along the way. So yeah, if I was attempting this by myself, maybe it wouldn't have been as fun. But yeah, I got an audience now. The clown must perform. So if you like all that stuff, like everything that I talked about of being a small YouTuber, yeah, for sure, small, then give it a go. This is not me like being like, this is the greatest thing ever. I think there's definitely impact to, I said a couple times before that I don't actually love editing videos that much. I am somebody who's had like experience editing videos and like making title graphics and doing like logo stuff. And even then it takes a long time for me. Like I did it for a job for a little bit and it still takes me a long time. So I understand that if you're starting from scratch with no knowledge, it can be pretty, I think there's better tools out now where you don't have to rely on very professional knowledge to do all this. But even then, it could be a learning curve. It's definitely not for everyone. But yeah, it's been a good year and I am excited to do more in the future. hopefully this year also, like, I want to put out I have some content planned that will take a little bit more time, and I am trying to balance that while I have this full-time job. So we'll see how much of that actually materializes. But yeah, I'm feeling good, and hopefully you guys are too. And let me know if you have any more questions about being a knitting YouTuber, my first year here, and I will try my best to answer them in the comments. So cool. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.